think we are just about set to go. Good morning and welcome to another FAC, Florida Association of Counties webinar. This morning we are joined by Jamie Grant, the state of Florida's Chief Information Officer with the Florida Digital Service, and Tanium. This webinar is focused on the local cybersecurity grant program that is set to launch very soon. So we have folks joining us from Tanium and Jamie Grant from the Florida Digital Service. So we're going to get started here. I think there's still some folks coming into the room, but don't want to be timely. So again, welcome. I'm going to just introduce a few of the bills that were the focus of some the cybersecurity legislation last year. There were two bills that FACS tracked, supported, and passed the legislature. There was a group of stakeholders working on those bills, and that was House Bill 7055 on cybersecurity reporting, standards, and training for local governments and state government, and House Bill 7057, which is a public records exemption bill for critical infrastructure and cybersecurity information. And I'm going to start real fast with that second bill, 7057, which is the public records bill. This was a general but very broad cybersecurity public meeting and public records exemption that included insurance coverage limit protection, network schematics, hardware and software configurations, and the cybersecurity incident information, and that public meetings exemption. So that is something that was really crucial in protecting certain information from falling into the wrong hands. And on the next slide, just some more background. I know Jamie Grant's going to go into a little bit more detail on the bills. Was House Bill 7055 on the ransomware prohibition, and it included incident reporting requirements, standards adoption. Local governments are going to be required to adopt cybersecurity standards by, if you're a county over 75,000 by next year, and if you're under 75,000 by 2025. There's also a component for training for state and local governments. Which was also funded in the budget this current year. And again, that compliance is uniform between state and local agencies. And like we've been saying, it's a funded mandate. And we're going to talk more about the local grants and grant program that is being set up through the DMS and the Florida Digital Service. So I'm going to pass it over to Jamie to give some more information.
Well, thank you, Jeff. We can go ahead and pass the cover slide. I know Becky's going to drive for me. I thought it'd be good to just give some folks who may not be familiar with the Florida Digital Service, kind of what we are, who we are, and what we do. And so kind of briefly, giving a background a little bit for those of you who may go back to the State Technology Office or AEIT or AST days. The Florida Digital Service is really the fifth iteration of an attempt in Florida to get state technology right. And I think I can fairly say that this team is committed to doing that. I think we've changed the narrative, and we're looking forward to this program being a real launching pad to take a lot of the successes and reforms out of Tallahassee to partner throughout the state. But very briefly, I have a few different direct reports or a few different verticals, but the chief data officer of the state reports to me, really focused on the enterprise data catalog and data interoperability. The chief information security officer, obviously a heavy focus today, and two deputies that are a huge addition. So when I got here and got appointed, there was no CISO, and said CISO, who was subsequently hired, had no deputies. There's now a team of three real executive leaders there that, from the CISO perspective, from the today or the operations perspective, and then the strategy and planning or tomorrow perspective, cybersecurity, some real rock star leadership there that's advancing the initiatives that we've put out. The chief of service experience, our service experience team, is really there to help on the procurement design. They have a statutory responsibility to help do project oversight of large technology projects, but really trying to get on the front end of procurements, understanding that that's where you really design the success of a project. And then a chief operating officer that has the budget and procurement, policy, rulemaking, and grant management or grant creation function. So really three kind of core business verticals, and then the fourth with rulemaking and some of the policy and budget there. Becky, if we want to go ahead and transition to the next slide. To give everybody just an overview, high level of some of our responsibilities, but coming 2 sessions ago, we were designated as the lead entity on cybersecurity, responsible to operate and maintain a cybersecurity operations center that was capable of detecting threats through proactive monitoring, continuous security monitoring, establishing incident response teams, effectively laying out the state's first ever enterprise-wide cybersecurity operations center and cybersecurity capabilities. Agencies are effectively required in statute to consume those offerings. So we have the responsibility to offer them. Agencies are responsible for establishing those capabilities, typically through coordination and collaboration with us. The following session is where we saw the $30 million for local government cybersecurity capabilities get funded and appropriated that allows us to really get into the cross-jurisdiction whole estate effort that we're super excited to be launching here imminently. Becky, we can go ahead and move forward. Just to give everybody a kind of an intro to us as an operation and how we operate, we're big believers in scorecards. We're big believers that if you don't measure it, it doesn't matter to you. And so really trying to get in the posture of communicating out the metrics and giving people an understanding of whether or not things are moving in a good direction or not a great direction. The digital service was very intentionally created to be a small and agile organization. Some have made the comparison to kind of the special forces of state technology rather than kind of the large administrative bureaucracies that can sometimes show up. So our total FTE this year is actually 70 full-time equivalent on paper. We expect that to grow as this session kicks off and see the continued growth. But in existence today, we have 29 FTE focused on cyber. We've got $148 million that we're responsible for. 62.2 of that is cybersecurity in and of itself. When you look at agency collaboration, and I think this is one of the things that, quite frankly, we're most proud of. Prior to the DeSantis administration and prior to our team coming on board, 0 state agencies had ever collaborated in real time on cybersecurity. We now have 32 agencies collaborating in real time with the Cybersecurity Operations Center, 9 of those agencies fully integrating with the Cybersecurity Operations Center and 23 partially integrating. We expect to see that 9 number go up, the 32 number to go up, and the 23 number to go down, where partial integration becomes less likely. Becky, we'll go ahead and move to the next slide if that's all right. And having looked at kind of who we are and how we're situated, I'm a big believer in partnership hybrid models with the private sector and leveraging capabilities that exist outside government, understanding that capital expenditures are really hard to both acquire and then maintain in the government space. So how do we get away from a capital expenditure world into an OpEx world? How do we consume in a cloud and SaaS-based world and a managed service environment where we can leverage the great talent and the team we've built, but also have the number of bodies and hours necessary? When you start quantifying kind of what we're seeing just in the early infancy of the state cybersecurity operations center, I think you see the numbers get kind of staggering. We have 172 open investigations as of the January scorecard. That's 2.45 open investigations for all of our FTE. So if everybody in the digital service did nothing but cybersecurity and could help close investigations, that's what you'd be at. We're 5.93 open investigations per cybersecurity FTE when you start to shrink that down. And then when you get to credible threat sightings, you start to see the volume of what we have to deal with. And so regardless of whether or not I and our team believed in an operational, in an OpEx model and kind of a hybrid public-private partnership to take advantage of what's in the private sector, I think you can see it's just absolutely impossible to deal with the volume that we all know will grow as continued adoption happens. So Becky, we'll transition to the next slide where we kind of talk about maybe the design principles and a few of the things that kind of led to the offering that we're opening up beginning tomorrow to local governments to begin partnering with us. So when you think about kind of the designs and not to go deep into it, but for an audience that I think probably has an understanding on this, but kind of 3 choices, right? You could single stack it where you go to one vendor and say, hey, you're going to be my cybersecurity vendor to give me all of the things I need in the Cybersecurity Operations Center. And, you get the upside of maybe one transaction, you get the upside of not needing to do as much integration and maybe partnership work and those kind of things. You get the downside of not having access to a lot of different tool sets, and you get the downside of being stuck to one vendor. And so that's certainly not a place we want to put the state. Systems integrators have kind of become the next iteration of that, where maybe instead of single stack on the technology set, it's a single stack to somebody who brings their technology stack. And that just really, I think, kind of enhances the single stack model slightly by saying, hey, you're not going to be stuck to a single set of tools, but you are still kind of having a single vendor that really you've outsourced the program to. And then the third and the most difficult and the time consuming is kind of a multi-vendor integrated marketplace, where we say, hey, we're going to support a number of solutions and tool sets, even having multiple solutions for the same function, as long as that's standardized. And we'll touch on some of the standards as we move. We went with the third option because, quite frankly, it's the only playbook I know how to run from my private sector days, and what I'll go back to when I leave public life. But you avoid the single vendor dependency, access to kind of best of breed, as some will sum it up. And you avoid requiring, and I think this is one of the most important things, you avoid requiring your partners to adopt a single stack, or to rip out something they have today. So some of you may already be doing, endpoint in a great way, or asset discovery in a great way. I don't want to come to you and say, hey, just because you're one of those local governments that was, progressive and proactive and adopted functions and took cybersecurity, you got the funding and you got moving. I need you to rip out what you have and implement what I have if you want to partner with us. We need to meet you kind of where you are and make sure that we're supporting a number of solutions to make sure that we can operate. Becky, we'll go ahead to the next slide. What we kind of measure to see how we're doing on some of these baseline functions. Content delivery network was kind of the next that I was going to get to, but when you look at the number of websites and the number of attack traffic diverted on a 30-day spectrum, you start to see the volume again of some of this stuff. So understanding that we're discovering devices, we're also discovering missing patches. And so how do we give you both the tools to discover the devices, to discover the missing patches, and then to subsequently make sure that you have the resources to patch? Or how do we make sure that the closure rate stays closer to 98.95% instead of 83.52% when you get EDR notifications? And so this is kind of holistically what we've been doing at the state agency level across the enterprise, and what drives kind of the beginning and phase one of what we want to do with our local partners from Key West to Pensacola. So Becky, let's see if we can keep this momentum going and roll slide. There we go. So Jeff kind of touched on, and I'll touch quickly because there was obviously some impactful legislation that kind of took some of the components out of just the state level to the local level. But one of the things I want to be really emphatic about is the public records exemption, because before last session, the state had what I would describe, my office, my team, and state agencies had what I would call kind of a C+ or B- public records exemption. Like it protected a very finite amount of cybersecurity information, and quite frankly, left us vulnerable to having to disclose some stuff that wouldn't be good for the Russians, the Chinese, or the Iranians to have. And so at the same time, local government had no public records exemption. So when my friends in my old district down in Oldsmar called with the situation that made news, we sent a team of incident responders down there. And it's true that our public records exemption travels with us, but that doesn't exactly give the local government, the local entity, the coverage that they need to feel comfortable that they can do what they need to do to protect their jurisdiction. And so we worked really hard to make sure that we turned what was maybe a C+ or B- public records exemption that only applied to the state into an A+ public records exemption that applied both to state and local government. So I would strongly encourage you, especially if you're kind of in the technical or IT, OT fields, to make sure your general counsels are aware of 119.0725, because I think it truly is kind of the national standard that allows you to protect information that would be used to perhaps make you vulnerable or have your infrastructure owned. Getting to kind of where we want to build upon the successes of the last year, governance, risk, and compliance is a big focus. Identity and access management, credential and access management, multi-factor authentication, a lot of baseline things that you may be doing in your office, quite frankly, just aren't happening when we go into a lot of environments. And so it's a little more fun when we're on stage and interactive, but I had some fun with the Phlogistic crowd last week for any of you that were there, and basically said, how many admin accounts across the state enterprise with no password would mortify you? And the reality is we found more in one agency than anybody would say for the entire enterprise, 54 inside of one agency. admin accounts with no password. And so when you start thinking about that, and then you start layering on domain trusts and all the different ways that can make our constituents and citizens' data and our operations vulnerable, it's obviously a big focus of ours. So those are three areas we want to look at in addition to, those are kind of three big priority areas in addition to some additional baseline stuff. But really, and what we're here to talk about today is the launch of kind of whole estate as people talk about it. But I'll describe it as the most robust and collaborative cybersecurity program in America, and dare anybody to argue with us. So, we want this to be a tipping point that really, truly, finally gets Florida from a posture of, several years ago, I think a historic loser. I've described my feelings when I took this job. It was kind of like taking over a program that should be winning national championships, but had never won a football game, and going on a journey to get the team believing that they could win a game, to winning the first game, and to kind of slowly building the momentum. This program is a huge priority for us. It's a major way for us in Florida to truly establish the model. And so there's a number of things that I would say are kind of the principles that are driving it. First and foremost, who we are as a digital service. And this is kind of our first chance to introduce our brand and our culture to you, the rest of the state. But things like least privileged access, right? If we don't have to own it, touch it, manage it, see it, we don't want admin credentials unless we absolutely have to have admin credentials. So, I talk about the scenario where having a firefighter in your house 24/7 just to be able to put fires out could be awkward in different situations. It's not awkward if there's a fire in your house. And so we may need to come into the house with you, invited by you, to help put a fire out. But as soon as you ask us to leave and the fire having been put out, we're out. I can't stress enough that between the public records exemption and least privilege access, we want to be really disciplined about not offering something we can't fulfill and not asking for more vulnerability or more access than is actually needed to fulfill the things that we're doing. Two, we want to make sure that we maintain an integrated marketplace so that we don't have a whole bunch of silos sprawl up that take us from lots of blind spots at the state level to lots of blind spots through the local level. We want to be helpful on the purchasing and procurement side. I had somebody come up to me after Flagissa last week, and we talked about agency term contracts and cooperative purchasing agreements and making sure that we can help local governments move more quickly. But this was a local government CIO who they're an O365 shop, and in order to get 300 new licenses O365, they have to actually go to an RFP, which is just insanity to me. And so how can we leverage tools that we have between DMS and the Florida Digital Service to get straight to action, to mitigate the administrative burden that comes along with most audits and grant managers and all sorts of bean counters and investigators and auditors to see if it was done. And let's just get right to the business of cybersecurity. So how we can distribute capabilities to help you solve some of your existing needs. So Becky, we'll go ahead and roll forward. And I think we'll jump into one issue that I know has come up for some folks, and I want to give the very clear caveat. There's two major takeaways that I want you to have. The slide kind of gets into rationale, but I want you to have two really major takeaways from this. Number one, we work closely with CISA. Pensacola is a key component of CISA's infrastructure. It's obviously a big component of ours between the Corey Station, the UAS, and the number of resources there. We want to continue being really great partners with CISA. But for those of you familiar with the federal grant program, Florida elected not to participate. And this slide kind of touches on, really, quite frankly, why. The federal grant program had a lot as it got down to the wire, and we finally got, with about 45 days left to react, the clarification of what the program had to be, a ton of bureaucratic and administrative processes just to be able to get $5.8 million this year, $30 million over 4 years. And a couple of major initiatives that I think, or a couple of major elements that I think are relevant to this group is the match requirement actually was passed down at the sub-recipient level. So even though I was prepared to use our budget to help pay the match, especially for some of the jurisdictions that may have a JV volleyball coach that's a bus driver that's also the CISO, right? The one body that the county can look at and say, hey, you're going to do those things. Super under-resourced, super ill-equipped, doesn't have the budget flexibility, I guess, and the unused dollars. We wanted to be able to cover that. We couldn't in the federal program. With our program, there is actually no match. So we're not asking for a financial match. We're asking for you to just collaborate and share telemetry data and integrate with the Cybersecurity Operations Center and be a part of the team we're building across the state to make sure that Florida really is the first state to go this deep and this broad when it comes to capabilities. I touched on kind of the disparity. The federal program is $30 million over 4 years. We're $30 million this year. I think the governor's recommended budget will be coming out here very, very shortly. And I think there's some really good news in that. And then there was an additional requirements element that consented to ongoing monitoring, application scans, external scans, which I would consent and I would tell everybody are already happening. That's not a big secret. The Albert sensors, the Einstein sensors, a number of those tools. What was really unique about the federal program, though, is that they wanted us to consent on behalf of the state to receiving recommendations from CISA based on external scans. So an entity that's scanning from the outside that may not have access to the same information you have inside your network or on top of your infrastructure, telling you what you need to do and kind of putting you in a situation where you have to chase all of those down. Again, all we're asking is that you cooperate with the Cybersecurity Operations Center, partner with us, and help us take Florida to the next level and truly lead the nation with cybersecurity capabilities across the state. The second thing I want to say clearly is for those of you who filled out responsive to the Florida Division of Emergency Management, which was the administrative back office to the federal grant. If you filled out their application process, I know there was like a really quick window, fill that out. All of those applications were actually handed to us. Please, please, please still take the really quick time it takes to fill out our application. That's going to get you into the scoring queue. We have procured some third-party services to help do some of the quantitative scoring on the competitive grant program. It will expedite things significantly if you take just a little bit of time to fill out our application as it comes live. Becky will go ahead and hit the next slide and I think land in and hand it off to Chris. So here's effectively what we're kind of looking at in Florida. We want the integrated capabilities to make sure that we can address kind of these core functions: asset discoveries, asset inventories, and endpoint detection and response, content delivery network, incident response assistance, email security service, 24/7, 365 monitoring and response service. The application also gives you the ability to ask for some sort of capability. Maybe you're further along in your journey. We don't want to leave you out. So the application will definitely focus on those things. Those are our biggest priorities because we know those are kind of just baseline to get people in a posture where we can begin doing vulnerability management and threat intel and a number of things that we know we've got to get to in really short order. I want to stress, while I cannot promise future funding, there are a couple of things I would stress. Number one, when you see the grant application, there is a commitment, a representation, and a warranty from us that any subsequent funding will be used first to continue existing operations. So if you have, let's just say hypothetically, there's $30 million in year one, and let's just say it's only $30 million in year two. We will use that $30 million in year two to make sure that the folks in that received the $30 million in year one do not fall off a cliff and subsequently have to find the funding. So net new money will add new customers, but we will use any future funding to make sure that we keep you whole on this journey before we add customers and capabilities. It doesn't do any of us any good for us to get you 1 year relatively mature and then look you in the eye and say, hey, you're on your own. We're not interested in doing that. And then secondarily, you can draw the dots from the governor's recommended budget when you see it in short order. But I think this number, I think we're in for some really good news. We have a governor that believes in making sure that we lead the way on this. He's been really clear with me and the team that he expects us to lead the way on this. And so we're excited to get there. Becky, we will go ahead. I think I lied, and I think we have one more slide. I'm blind, so I'm guessing. Here we go. So here's the process. If you have questions on the program, cybersecurity grants at digital.fl.gov is going to be the place to go. The application window the application will be published February 1st. We are intentionally not having applications for those first couple of weeks to allow for due diligence, discovery, town halls, office hours, getting with our team, getting with some of our vendors. We have told our vendor partners, and it is not an exclusive list by any stretch, we have told our vendor partners that if they have local governments that are interested in integrating, if you're getting, pinged on with somebody saying, hey, we work in Tallahassee with the Florida Digital Service, and we can help you do discovery and due diligence and talk through things, that would presumably be an accurate statement. If a vendor comes to you and says, you shall work with, or Jamie said, I need to come see you, that's a bit of an overstep. And so I give you that to say, I simultaneously need, as we launch kind of a startup from within government, never having done this before, we need partners like the Florida Association of Counties. We need the League of Cities. We need FLAGISA. We need organizations and memberships to get to a place where we can communicate as a state around cybersecurity much better. Part of the portal that will launch tomorrow is a request for you to give us email addresses if you want to be inside of a Slack environment, different channels on different functions to have real-time communication across a number of environments. So tomorrow, there will be an announcement. We are still finalizing how that announcement will go out. So we will be reaching out to our partners to say, hey guys, it's live. My Twitter account is the backup in the event that we need to use it. But we will make sure we amplify out the URL tomorrow so that everybody has that as soon as that goes live. You'll see a couple of pieces of information that we're looking for there. Tell us about your organization, what part of the state you're in, what type of entity. Tell us what some of your priorities in cybersecurity are, and then give us email addresses that you'd like to have included in the Slack environment. We're providing that Slack ecosystem statewide on this front. And then there will be a couple of resources, including the sample application. So you can download that document and start doing the work you need to do with your team to be able to answer some of those questions. And I think, half symbolically and half intentionally having some fun. On Valentine's Day, we want to show the entire state some love and open up for $30 million to be applied for. So that application window will be February 14th to March 31st. It is a really simple, streamlined application. You probably have to check the boxes of getting the grant manager or administrator to look at it. I would like to think that if you know your environment and have your team together, you can fill out this application in less than 30 minutes, including time to make a sandwich, eat the sandwich, and then get back to the application process. It is intentionally designed to be a really efficient look at where you are and what you're doing. From April 1 to April 15th, we're going to do the scoring process. So majority of the scoring is quantitative, right? So a reward, really the competitive grant program, will look at how broadly you want to integrate with the Cybersecurity Operations Center and how ready you are to go. So those that want to jump in the boat quickly and those that want to buy all the way in, there will be points for that. For those who have existing solutions, you may say, hey, I have an existing solution on something, and I'm willing to integrate that with the Cybersecurity Operations Center by way of a SEM or gray matter. You will get points for that as well, right? So we want to reward good behavior. We want to discourage bad behavior. And for those of you who have nothing, quite frankly, there's a little bit of an advantage because you get to adopt a lot of different things. If you said, I want to adopt it all and I'm ready to go. So a little bit of a blend of both quantitative and then there's an element of qualitative for us to assess specific parts of critical infrastructure. So if you have, when you see the application, if you have information about your jurisdiction that you say, hey, I'm not just your regular critical infrastructure, I'm really critical infrastructure, and here's some things I want you to consider, get us that information because we'll have a small committee of myself, our state CISO, the two deputy CISOs that will go through some of that qualitative work. And then on tax day, because the federal government's taking your money, we're going to give you some money. And we're going to have some fun with the initial announcement of grant awards. That will be the overwhelming majority. Our intent is that we get the majority of funds out. We will have a little bit of a reserve to make sure that we don't overspend based on things that happen when we get into implementations and maybe somebody has a bigger need than they thought. So we'll have a slight little reserve held back that we'll get on the street just as quickly as we can. So April 15th will be that announcement of initial grant awards. We'll get straight into implementations out of that. We'll use the rest of the reserve. Now, Jeff, I need your help and I need your members' help, because if people wait, and this is just going to be legislative advocacy 101, if people wait till March 31st to apply, we're a few weeks into the legislative session. And it becomes a lot harder for us to demonstrate how big the need is to the legislature, who, if you watch the first committee ever, the first ever policy committee on cybersecurity, the legislature's interest cannot be overstated. So guys, I know we're doing 2 weeks of due diligence. The sooner we get applications in, and I want them done right before I want them to do fast. I tell my team all the time, right before fast, but don't make me choose. Let's really try and make sure that we collectively do the work to see those applications coming in towards the end of February and early March, because we've done the due diligence, we've done the technical dives, and you know what's there. So with that, Becky, I think that's my last slide, and we kick it over to Chris, unless there's a surprise. But guys, I can't thank you enough for having us here today. This is a team, and there's no way for us to get this done without all elements of the team. We're not going to force this down your throat. We want to give you an offering that makes your life better and makes your life easier. So from implementation services to managed services to actual capabilities, we're looking holistically at it to make sure that Florida truly goes from maybe worst in the nation with state technology several years ago to truly first in the nation because of our partnership and teamwork.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Jamie. Great to be here. This is Chris Cruz. I am the CIO for public sector here at Tanium, and I'm a previous county CIO. So Jamie, I want to commend you for the comprehensive plan and framework that you've put together around cybersecurity. I work with many state agencies and departments across the country, and I have to say this is the most comprehensive plan and framework that I've seen. The level of detail, I think innovation and agility have gone into it is unparalleled. So you and your team in FLDS should be commended. A couple areas I wanted to leave the organizations with from a county perspective is the visibility management and control of what Jamie's speaking to is really important today, of having some level of standardization within your environment. And this is really important based on best practices and lessons learned. You know, today's data and the cyber landscape is all about visibility and management and control, and ensuring that you're detecting your environment and managing and mitigating risk quickly. So using real-time data to make educated decisions really aligns with what Jamie and his plan is moving forward with in terms of that implementation. We have many changing landscape of proliferations today. A couple of those are around remote devices. With the advent of COVID and the virtual agility environment that we have working today, there's a new technical environment in place. So you need visibility management and control and agility and management across all of your endpoints of your environment. So having a standardized technology environment that sends data directly to your security operations center is key today to managing and mitigating risk. Also, the importance of good cyber hygiene as well is making sure that you're patching and you have those necessary components in place. You have a standardized, centralized vision of management and control, and a single platform of capability really aligns to today with addressing and mitigating risks. You know, cybersecurity is a team sport. So I found as a county CIO, having the ability to plug into state processes and procedures and aligning with those particular competencies helped me sleep at night. It allowed me to give that visibility, allowed a partnership type role here. The use of standardized tools and an innovative approach to manage and address risk easy is really important. Also, having a single source of truth is extremely capable and important these days to be able to have that data to make educated decisions, whether it be at the county level, the city level, up to the state. It's a true partnership in terms of how we do things today. And also there's a huge reduction in risk as well as using less resources at the county level. You know, I found as a county CIO, I always struggled with resources. I didn't have a deep bench of folks. I wasn't always aligned with best practices because I didn't have the type of budget that is available here. So I think having that type of budget available from the state to pass that money to the county through this grant program is really a step in the right direction. This will allow, again, integration. It will allow visibility. It will allow coordination with the tax. It will allow folks to come in and be proactive in terms of the planning rather than reactive to crisis management. And often we find ourselves as CIOs and leaders in that type of management role. So having a proactive approach is really a first mechanism and fundamental best practice to cybersecurity prevention. Why state FLDS? I think it's important too. Having best practices, again, augmenting your staff, using enterprise and what I call grade A technology, and a standardized platform approach of best of breed tools. I think this is really important when you have counties with different levels of budgets that allows everybody to play in the same playing field, have the same tools, have the same policies and procedures to align and ensure that there's success in those particular areas. So those are really important, I think, in terms of this management area, having a framework, being able to share common data on the threat landscape. Today, the threat landscape is expanded, as I say, beyond the four walls of the perimeter you're building, to your office, to Starbucks, to wherever you choose to work. And having that visibility management and control is a key essential to being successful today. And I believe Jamie's plan and framework addresses that with best of breed technologies, the necessary alignment, and the necessary people and process to effectuate positive technology. So all in all, I'm very supportive of this plan. Again, I think there's great innovation and agility that's gone into this. I believe having this level of partnership with the state is beneficial to your success. Having the ability to standardize on a single platform and address those particular deficiencies in your organization will result in a more efficient and effective cybersecurity program for the state of Florida.
And thank you, Chris. And I just want to, but before I pass it over to Adam, also with Tanium, I just want to remind everybody to, if you have any questions, I know Jamie's presentation was really thorough, and we've got some great experts on the call with us. But put those questions into the Q&A function below, and we're going to have a brief Q&A after Adam. Adam, please take it away.
Thanks, Jeff. Thanks, everyone. And yes, I'll keep it very brief so we have good time for Q&A. I am the Director of Accounts for Tanium's public sector practice. We really appreciate the opportunity to speak with you. It's really great to partner with the state on this initiative, as well as some work we've been doing with the agencies. Just to put a fine point on who Tanium is, what we do, Tanium is a converged endpoint management platform built to ensure great cyber hygiene across security, operations, and compliance. We do that with a unique communication architecture that allows for incredible visibility into and control of endpoints. So we've been working closely with FLDS to support their efforts across the state agencies, particularly around asset discovery and inventory, a critical step in securing any environment. And we're really excited to work with you and be a part of your due diligence and vetting process as you look at potential technologies to include in your applications. In addition to Tanium, there's tons of other great technologies that FLDS and Jamie have been working with and vetting. And as Jamie said, there's no set list, but there are some great technologies that I'd love to help you get engaged with and consider them as part of your application process. So you can see my email address at the bottom there, in addition to the resources that Jamie shared and the information that they'll be giving out over the next couple of days. Please don't hesitate to reach out to me. We'd love to introduce you to Tanium more thoroughly and have you consider that as part of your application, as well as some of the other great technologies that we're already working with and integrated with at the state level. So please don't hesitate to reach out and look forward to working with you. Jeff, I'll turn it back over to you for Q&A.
All right. And thank you, Adam. And I do see a few questions that came over here in the chat. And Jamie, I know you had an important email address up there, and I want to confirm it before I share it with everybody. It was cybersecuritygrants@digital.fl.gov.
That's right. That's right. If folks will shoot there, we will. I will tell you, I really would love to share a URL with you today. I'm still waiting on a couple final approvals above my pay grade. It's a good reminder that I don't work for myself anymore in this job. And so I think we'll have some information. Feel free to email us and say you'd like information there. Also, Jeff will work with you to make sure we leverage your distribution channels that I know are probably a little bit mature on that front. But I would stress, as soon as we get that out tomorrow, you'll be able to download the application and give us email addresses to have Slack accounts set up so that we can get a little bit better about real-time communication.
All right, so I'm going to jump into the Q&A. I see a few questions about K through 12 and whether HB 7057, the public records bill, and applies to K through 12 education, and whether confirming whether K-12 public education districts will be eligible for the grant.
So the first, I'm going to dust off, for those of you who don't know, I'm a recovering lawyer who spent about 1.5 years. Please check with your general counsel. I don't want to give you an opinion on that gets you twisted. If anybody, I'll kind of return, sorry, if your general counsel is telling you that they don't think it does, please reach out to that same email address or to CIO@. That will come directly to me. So instead of cybersecurity grants at digital, you can just send it to CIO@. And let me know if you have a general counsel that's saying they don't think it applies, so we can either help them understand that it does, or make sure that we get to work this session to maybe fix that. As far as the eligibility for the local grants, the way that the budget proviso reads is counties and municipalities. And so what I would stress is that anything that touches counties and municipalities that helps us run under that umbrella, I will be construing, and I've directed our team to construe counties and municipalities as broadly as we can under the law. So as long as I don't run afoul of the law, that would cover anything we can there. Now, the second thing I'll say, and I noticed Jeff, water management districts was was also asked about. K-12 and water management districts are two that are on our list right now to try and get some clarification on. Please submit your application, right? Like, you're only helping us demonstrate the need, and you may feel like it's time wasted in the event that legislative staff tells us that you're not eligible. You'll help demonstrate the fact that we need to potentially get new policy next year and make sure that that budget language isn't perhaps short-sighted and leaving some unintended folks out. B, we may be able to fund some of your needs at the state level because, like, a water management district might be a special district that kind of sits in a weird place. I will stress from our perspective, the principles of the digital service is your problems are ours. We say kind of send us. And so whether it's from the state resources or this grant program, we want to make sure we're truly working on whole estate. So we will work with you. I know that's a lot of words, Jeff, to say we're unsure about a couple of things, but you're going to help us get to clarity. There's still a chance you can help us get to yes, but counties and municipalities is the language in the budget. So anything you can offer that helps demonstrate why you're a part of a county or a municipality helps us get to yes, and know that even if there's a no on some of those, that you'll be at the top of our list as we look at new funding and maybe teasing why we were able to get governor's recommended budget, let's say $30 million plus at least a little bit.
Thank you for the answer, Jamie. And I do want to take care of a couple other housekeeping things, some questions that came through. We will try to work to get this recording up and available as soon as possible. There's a little cleanup that we do on our end, but will be the link and presentation will be available as soon as possible. And there was another question about if we could share the emails of the folks with Jamie's team. We will work to get all of the attendees who registered for today's webinar over to digital service to help make sure everybody has those contacts. And just moving down through and make sure I didn't.
Hey, Jeff, you're fine. If you want to PDF up the deck and shoot it out, I mean, it's public. So if you want to shoot the deck, if that's helpful to folks, that cybersecurity grants also goes to our team. So that's a little distribution list that's routed to a few folks there. So it's not just a single person managing that inbox.
All right. And I see, where do we go to see the applications and what can we use it for? So that should be a tomorrow thing. I was actually looking while Chris and Adam were doing their piece to see if I had confirmation of something we've routed. I suspect that would be live. It is expected to be live tomorrow. And we will get that out every channel possible. So Jeff will probably coordinate with your team, whether it's listserv, that kind of stuff. And then my Twitter handle is at James Grant FL. So if you want to share that, I'll probably have the official tweet first, but we will amplify it out everywhere we can. And this will be the last time that we're kind of in this posture where we kind of launch. But we're looking forward to having the ability to tell you this is where to go and get ongoing communication. I would also expect, right, the announcement of future town halls, webinars, things. Slack will be that primary place where we'll have different technical folks and partner-specific channels and ways to do both technical deep dives in education as well as just broad information. So I can't stress enough that the best way to communicate with the program and receive updates is to get into that Slack environment as we roll it out. All right. And I see a very specific question, so I'm going to do my best here to summarize. It's relating to the small police departments wanting to strengthen their cyber position. And there's, I guess, upcoming changes to the CJIS security policy. Will this funding be able to help meet those requirements? And if there's any assistance available for grant writing or the application process?
Yeah, so kind of that question and the next question, Jeff. There's a few that I could probably bundle here. I think the first thing I'd say is if you need assistance with the grant writing or application, we have fundamentally failed. I'm really confident that when you download the grant application tomorrow, you'll see exactly what I mean. But this is not intended to be a technical or grant administrator, grant executive type of role necessary to fill this out. It should actually cater much more to the operators in the security, IT, OT space. Secondly, we're not saying that the only thing that capabilities will be distributed for are approved FDS products, or as Tim asks, in the ecosystem. We have not standardized on an MFA solution. We are deploying, we're actually in a couple of proof of concepts. That's where I go back to what I said earlier, and Tim, you might not have been on at the time, but kind of stressing there's a part of the application that says, hey, if there's something else you'd like us to consider because you're more mature in your journey and MFA is something you're ready to embrace and go, please don't hesitate to give us that information. The kind of the decision point I'll tell you is there's going to be some things, network security, MFA, there's things that may not really need to, let's say, integrate with the Cybersecurity Operations Center. And by not integrating, they're not creating a new silo. What we're not interested is funding, let's say, endpoint that's not integrated with the SOC, or funding asset discovery or asset management that's not integrated with the SOC, because now we're kind of just creating new blind spots. So there's maybe a couple truths there to some. We definitely are interested in furthering the partnerships that we've drilled to ground and have seen a lot of great progress at the state level. That is not a comprehensive list. But what we're not looking to do is create further shadows and blind spots for us as we do kind of whole estate cybersecurity.
All right, and here's a two-part question, or kind of combining a few. What can the grant funds be used for, and are there minimum or maximum amounts that could be awarded, or can it be used for staffing? Yeah,
so there's a few things there, and it's a few good questions. Number one, no minimum, no maximum. So what I will tell you is I'm more interested in making sure that an applicant gets everything that they need than kind of giving applicants a small portion of what they need. So if you subscribe to the minimum viable product, if you're not familiar with it, if you just Google minimum viable product and look at images, it's pretty clear kind of what that approach looks like. We subscribe to that. So we don't want to give you just enough to fail. We don't want to give you just licenses and not managed services. One of the things we've heard overwhelmingly from staff, and we're not saying that we're not going to give out funds, but we've had a lot of local governments actually reach out saying they don't want to receive dollars, because if they receive dollars, it now has to go through budget processes and audits and grant management, and then all of the different things that come with the distribution of dollars. We've actually had a lot of local governments through different events and town halls and webinars say, can you please just give us capabilities? Because I gave the example of the procurement challenges where somebody has to go, we give them money and then they have to turn around and RFP it. Well, if we just gave them the capability off of a cooperative purchasing agreement at the state level, you avoided all the need for additional staff and IGs, AGs, lawyers, and all the things, and we got right to the business of cybersecurity. If you have something where you say, hey, I absolutely need funds for that, you'll be able to tell us and ask us to consider doing that. I'll tell you, our preference is to avoid a lot of those administrative costs and to try and give capabilities. Those agency term contracts and those cooperative purchasing agreements will actually have all of us, state and local, getting credit for unit prices and licenses to drive some of the best pricing you've ever seen. As an example, the model we deployed on our first purchase at the state level saved $4 million and 25% off of state term contract. So that's the best purported rate at the state government level. We were 25% less expensive. That was $4 million we could pump back in the program. So we're going to be looking to do capabilities. If you say, hey, I really need dollars and really want dollars, I encourage you to make that case, and we'll certainly consider it. And then when you look at dedicated funding for staffing, I think more likely than staff aug dollars or FTE payroll dollars is the managed services. So when we talk about both implementation to go live and then managed services to help operate, truly the hybrid model. If you need staff beyond what we're delivering in the way of capabilities and managed services, that's really a program flaw on our end, and something we should be fixing. But we shouldn't leave you needing additional staff, whether it's grant administrators, grant writers, auditors, finance people, or technical.
All right, and we do have a few questions still coming in here on the chat, but I do want to be mindful of everybody's time. We try to keep these webinars that are just about an hour. So let me see on here. So could you provide, or if you have a list of any of the providers or partners that you're working with?
Yeah, so there's a few. So Adam kind of touched on it. ReliaQuest is actually a Tampa-based company, one of the fastest growing cybersecurity companies in the country. This kind of answers that second question that Augusto asked. They are really an open architecture platform intended not to create, I'd say they kind of sit as Overwatch over a SIEM. So they do not compete with and regularly partner with some of the biggest SIEMs in the country. There's not a lot of tools that you would be using that ReliaQuest is not already partnering with from a technology perspective, and sometimes even an operations perspective. So ReliaQuest is the company. Gray Matter is that platform. And to that point, seeing your question, whether you're running, Sentinel or QRadar or Splunk, you have significant partnerships that exist there. So there's a couple different ways architecturally to get what you're trying to get into Gray Matter. I should kind of stress one thing I didn't talk about when I talked about least privilege, but one of the things we've also done, core design, and huge fail on my part for not saying earlier, is multi-tenant design. We do not believe in big boxes. We do not believe in kind of owning those things. So even with state agencies, they have their own tenant where they are sovereign and autonomous on that tenant, agreeing to share certain things with us under a data sharing agreement, similar commitment we'd make to you. We really just have the enterprise roll up over the top to see those to see that data, and then the ability to work with you and say, hey, if you need us to come in, we're happy to come in. So ReliaQuest Gray Matter is one. Tanium is who we're using on the asset discovery and inventory endpoint based, and some proof of concepts on patch and deploy services there. Foresight is a managed SOC service that came as a part of the way that was presented. So both the software tools and the services to support that offering. Armis is something we're doing network asset discovery by that we've been really happy with, and the way those collectors work. And then Palo Alto Expanse is what we've used on the outside end or the external look. Cloud Range is what we're using as a cyber range. Been a really big success. We've had more than 20 agencies, and this is almost a month old that I got this the last metrics on this, but more than 20 agencies have actually scheduled red team exercises using the Cloud Range platform. Sentinel-1 is somebody that we have used as our kind of primary on the endpoint detection and response. CrowdStrike, Carbon Black, Defender, all support what we call kind of at the state level supported alternatives, or things that we would say are actually supported right into the Cybersecurity Operations Center. There are additional, I don't want to turn it into a NASCAR race, but those are kind of some of like the core baselines for the what we described with maybe Akamai and Cloudflare being two options on the CDN front as well. A number of other kind of supported alternatives or things that are in the process of integrating. So that is, again, I would stress, not an exclusive list. If you came to me and said, hey, we have X and we want it to partner, we are more than willing to consider that.
Great. And I think there's a few questions about timelines and whether it's a one-time or multi-year.
Yeah.
And I think you had touched on that briefly earlier, that you want to make sure that they're all, you can take it away.
Yeah, no, you're fine. So, right, like the notion of like OpEx in a SaaS world means recurring costs, right? We're not making big capital infrastructures to write and manage our own software and write and run our own SOC or managed services. So by nature, these are, continuous services to go. We make a couple commitments, reps and warranties. So when I talk about multi-tenant, talk about least privilege access, those are kind of design functions. We're committed to signing a data sharing agreement, just like we did with local governments. You're going to have that tomorrow as well. You can see a sample of that. And then when you look at the application, you'll see the warranty that's subject to additional appropriation. We obviously can't commit to a multi-year program because only the legislature can appropriate funds. But subject to the legislature's appropriation, we will use any future appropriations to make whole the people that were already in the program so that they do not fall off the cliff before we add new spend to it. And what I would stress, just coming from a legislative background and transitioning from a full-time entrepreneur and part-time legislator to now, as my friends like to joke, a full-time bureaucrat. You show successes in a program like this, and it becomes almost impossible for the legislature to roll it back, because cybersecurity, and Jeff, we've joked about it. A lot of our friends, I found myself on different ends of political issues regularly with some of my friends at the League of Cities or the Association of Counties, and unfunded mandates and home rule and all of these fights that can happen in Tallahassee. Jeff had it on his slide. I don't know how many times you've ever seen a bigger, broader, I almost said something I shouldn't, but just awesome funded mandate that is an opt-in with Tallahassee saying we'll fund. Our ability to show cross-jurisdiction, critical infrastructure protection, report in the scorecards, make it almost impossible to undo it. It's kind of like the sunshine law or the gift ban. We all know there's real problems with it. The legislature never shows up to undo it because it's politically, it's almost political suicide. Cybersecurity is one of those issues, and I think everybody here probably gets it, but like red, blue, black, white, male, female, any other data element, we're all on the same team. And the reality is that the cyber criminal, the threat actor, doesn't care about political parties. It doesn't care about jurisdictions. It doesn't care about constitutional protections. It only cares to do us harm. And so we have to then understand that we can't care about those things and have fences around our teamwork. We got to get together and understand that, I think Chris said it, sometimes cliche, but true. It's a team sport where the name on the front of the jersey matters more. And the name on the front of the jersey here is Florida. So we want to support every way we can on that front. In order to do that, getting to quick successes, quick wins, demonstrating the buy-in, demonstrating the needs, all of those things will help us be your advocate to make sure we get future funding to continue and expand the program.
And I do see one last question. I think there's a few more in there, but we do need to wrap up. And it's about fiscally constrained counties and whether or not there will be a reimbursement grant or a project-based grant. I know some of those fiscally constrained, for each year, budget year to budget year can be pretty tough.
Yeah, we're a lot of the fiscally constrained and RACICs and some of those other, the counties, municipalities that are not in the same situation from a revenues perspective as many others, have been the loudest to say, please don't send us cash, send us capabilities and just help us implement so that it's there. We are looking to deploy capabilities. We are not looking to have I'll say we have a presumption to capabilities and an openness to distribute funds, with the understanding that funds are going to slow all of us down and bring lawyers and grant managers and other things that are there. Jeff, I want to close because I see a question and the concern, and I appreciate Ricardo who raises it. But I'll just tell you guys, if we don't lean in and go forward, there's not going to be funding, right? Like if there's not adoption, and if we don't take the leap, and I'll kind of just point to the success of the digital service. When I was appointed, we still had cost recovery, which meant we had a trust fund. And a lot of people think that's a great thing in Tallahassee, and it can be a huge advantage. It's a dedicated source of funding. We voluntarily gave up our trust fund. We voluntarily gave up the cost recovery model where we could charge agencies money. And we went all in on going to the legislature, seeing them as a venture fund or a board of directors and saying, hey guys, if you want these things to happen, we need you to fund it. And we've seen a tremendous, and Jeff, I think you've seen it, but the transition of getting out of the data center business, getting into a true center of excellence. My job and our team's job is to make sure that as we're going, you don't have the rug pulled out from under you. But I can just tell your members, if you hold up from implementing and adopting, that's the best chance to make sure that the funding dries up. Your best chance to make sure that funding continues is to jump in the boat and consume, so that when some knucklehead in the legislature gets the idea of trying to reduce the program, the biggest, baddest lobbying force that's ever existed from cities and counties across the state, agnostic of political parties and philosophies, shows up and says, before we start debating things on the floor of the House, we need to make sure that we can at least protect our constituents from the Chinese, the Russians, the North Koreans, the Iranians, and the pissed off kids in mom's basement as tools continue to get democratized. So I'm begging you guys, lean in, jump in, and then hold me accountable if we can't deliver.
And thank you. Appreciate the strength of local government lobbying here in the Capitol. And I do just want to make mention of in the Florida House this year, there is a subcommittee specifically on cybersecurity. It's something that FAC and the league, as mentioned, had worked on last year, and we're going to continue to work on. It's been identified as a legislative priority by this current speaker, and as well as the Infrastructure Strategies Committee. So it does seem to have a large focus. You see on your screen those dates that are coming soon, February 1st. Again, the governor's budget will be coming out here in the next week. So be sure to stay tuned. We're going to get you the information from this webinar, from the presentation as soon as we can, and we'll get that posted and out and those email addresses over to Jamie and his team. I really want to thank Jamie Grant and Florida Digital Service, Adam and Chris from Tanium. Thank you so much for helping us to corral this webinar, and all the folks who joined us today. And if you haven't, make sure you talk to the other folks in your county that make some of these budget decisions, if that's not you, on why they need to get ready and get in there to apply for this upcoming grant.
Jeff, can I give one shout out to local as we close? Because you touched on the committee, and even if you shoot the link out, I don't think enough credit was given to Highlands County. So often in the cybersecurity space, people say, well, if I got owned or I had a problem, I don't want to speak up because I might get fired, I might get in trouble. And the very first cybersecurity subcommittee in the history of the state started with the Highlands County Sheriff's Office standing up, talking about what happened and the vulnerabilities, and had the Florida Digital Service and our state CISO coming right behind to say, we need more people who will stand up and say, I need help. And we'll be there, not to get somebody fired, but to give that help. And I thought it was a really cool moment in state history, as maybe hyperbolic as that may sound to some, but the very first cybersecurity committee, policy committee in state history started with the partnership between a sheriff's office and the state, and how we have to navigate this together. And if you shot that link out to your members and you have members wondering how much legislative buy-in there is, they wouldn't have to spend all that time watching that committee to see the members jump in to support us. So the more we can show that teamwork, I just think that's a great example of how we can collectively work together to ensure success. But a major shout out to the Highlands folks.
And Adam, Chris, any last words here?
We appreciate the opportunity to help out any counties or municipalities that are interested in learning more about Tanium or any of the other technologies that they may be considering as part of their stack.
Thank you for the opportunity too. An excellent presentation, and look forward to working with the state of Florida and the Association of Counties. So thank you very much.
All right. Well, that'll do us here today. And thank you all for joining us on this local cybersecurity grant webinar.